Good evening, everyone! Today I'm talking about Stygian Outer Gods, a Lovecraftian shade of survival horror inspired by the first-person Resident Evil 7 and Village, developed by Mysterial Games. It is currently in early access, so I will just be reviewing the launch content, though there is at least a decent amount of it to talk about. Now, I'm not much of a fan of AAA games, but the publishers I do like are Nintendo and Capcom, and Resident Evil 7 was a fantastic game for me despite the back half's departure from the Baker House and retread into typical series shenanigans. And while I love the resurgence of retro-style tank control games like Crow Country and Conscript, I also want to encourage more games like RE7 as well. To this point, the only indie game I've seen to be at least vaguely inspired by it was Phobia, St. Dinfa Hotel. But now we've got Stygian Outer Gods to add to that. Well, I can't call it a pile, I guess it's just one game on top of another game. The protagonist Jack's been living a quiet life in Arkham until an old friend tells him his father's been found in the town of Kingsport, and his skepticism isn't helped by getting into a shipwreck on arrival. Everything's going weird and screwy in Kingsport, with witches roaming the streets and miners turned into creepy crawlies. I mean, it's Lovecraft, you know the deal. I appreciate that they don't waste your time with, could this place possibly be bad? Like, it's immediately bad. As you navigate through, you'll make friends or fiends of various unsavory characters, as you search for your dad and try to figure out if you can stop the impending cataclysm that'll doom the world. Spoiler alert, this game is a prequel, so I'm gonna say probably not. So what flavor of survival horror do we got? Well, it's the crawler brawl type, and in fact, I dare say they brought a little bit of immersive simulation to the party. When you start out in your apartment, you can go to your mirror and decide what kind of person you are, which determines your starting stats, strengths, and weaknesses. You have a speech skill which can help persuade NPCs, a knowledge of the occult for utilizing boons in the world, and lockpicking for opening chests and locked doors. You'll also occasionally find a talent card which will allow you to get minor or major perks, either improvements to your stats or entirely new abilities like lifting heavy objects. I chose an ability to speak with the dead, and this opens up an entire additional element of the game where you can help spirits be freed from their tether by finding something important to them. The fact that this is completely optional behind a perk is pretty cool. But yeah, you'll be stealthing around a large map as you accomplish objectives as well as unlock shortcuts. Though enemies are pretty slow, they do hit pretty hard, and I went with a build that was a lot more fragile, making encounters pretty risky in the early going. The enemies in the town require 5 hits from the sickle I found to go down, and they have a deceptively large reach with their own. That being said, I still found it relatively easy to get around, and taking down enemies in isolation was not that difficult. Make sure you have a lot of healing items on hand just in case. That's largely handled through crafting, from bandages to splints to lockpicks and bullets. But you can also find herbs and mushrooms in the world for a quick tiny bit of healing to your hit points or sanity. As bullets imply, you do get guns a couple of hours in, and this makes the encounters even easier as a headshot will take an enemy down flat. But that's perfectly fine in my opinion, as bullets are scarce in the world and so is gunpowder, which you need to craft more. It still emphasizes caution and resource management, which is very important in survival horror. That said, these enemies can be pretty spooky. They can even hit you through the wall, or through a flight of stairs from below. Okay, but actually, the game's not super buggy outside of that, which is probably the most impressive thing about Stygian, given how early this early access game is in development. I've played games at 1.0 that were much buggier, but I do think I should talk about the performance a little bit. As a fun little aside, my first attempt at running the game caused my CPU to heat up to 100 degrees Celsius. For the less tech-savvy, that's bad. It wasn't actually the fault of the game. I had to repaste the CPU as well as turn off a boost setting in the BIOS, and that fixed the issues. So instead of running at 5 frames per second, the game runs at 45 to 60 frames per second. So maybe I'm just happy that it runs properly at all, because I was mostly fine with how the game performed. But you're gonna need a powerful GPU to run it. My desktop's 2070 was not up to the task, sometimes running at 60, often frame dropping, and that's with all the settings on low. The CPU was actually not a bottleneck here. The devs promised to improve performance over the course of development, so we'll see if it gets better in the future. I hope they also improve the load times. They're not awful, about 20-ish seconds, but it's another spot they can tighten up. In terms of the amount of content, there's about 5 hours worth in the game so far. I'm glad that an early access game isn't just a demo at launch. You initially have access to just the town, but after finding some tablets you'll get access to a mansion exterior, a lighthouse, and some deep dark mines. It's a solid amount to explore, with lots of optional little houses and multiple ways to enter them, whether by moving a heavy barrel, picking the lock, or sometimes falling through a ruined ceiling. Some NPCs can be persuaded, though this isn't exactly Fallout New Vegas. It's a small indie game, so there's no factions or anything, but the decisions you do make will count towards an ending, whether you're compassionate or a brute. Still, being indie doesn't shield a developer from my biggest pet peeve, which is lack of enemy variety. While boss fights are on the content roadmap, I think additional enemy types in the town and surrounding areas would also be nice. There's just dogs, witches, and creepy crawlies, and that's it. And once you defeat them, they're gone from the world, which is fine. The game designs its resources around that, but they may need to figure out some sort of persistent threat that can remain even without enemies. One thing they did do was raise the tide of the ocean to flood the town after you escape from the mines, so it damages you to step in it and it can give you hypothermia, so that's a great way to keep a threat level even in a ghost town. The trade-off for the high system requirements is solid visuals. Even on low settings, it's really nice looking, with some caveats. The lighting is often good, but the HDR can bug a little bit going through a doorway. Also, the character's lip sync is just completely off, either because they're not syncing at all or because it's synced to a different language.
I was always attuned to your lies. When your father was still here, he told Stanley, and therefore me, of your otherworldly night terrors.
But English is the only language option in the settings, so you'll just have to live with some bonus stage-esque yapping. The sound design is highly atmospheric, again with some caveats. As your sanity meter decreases, they do a good job of slowly piping in all sorts of eerie noises, and enemies make sounds you can detect from a distance, so you know when it's time to start sneaking. But some environmental sounds are set to actual location triggers, like crows that call every time you go through this one exit. This includes dialogue, like when I picked up this pistol but didn't get the dialogue for it until I walked around to the other side of the desk.
A snubby, huh? Normally only see these held by cops.
That ruins a little bit of the illusion and feels a bit theme parky. They also have kinda cliched classical piano music for the save room. I always like hearing new save room musical compositions, and so dipping into the public domain well is just a little disappointing. For the UI, you've got the classic inventory Tetris to sort your belongings, and a hand-drawn map to help you find your bearings, though it's not very detailed. Your quick bar has 7 slots, 2 of which are for weapons, 4 of which are for recovery items, and 1 of which is for your light source. You start off with a measly lighter, but eventually get a much better lantern when you're exploring the mines. And I'll probably make a few people happy right away by saying no batteries. These lights stay on, baby. The various items take up 1, 2, 4, or even more slots in the inventory, so you can sometimes move something into your quick bar to free up room for a pickup. There are also artifacts which you can equip for tiny bonuses, but this requires a perk to be activated, and the bonuses are so small the juice doesn't really seem worth the squeeze. As far as the goal of being an indie RE7 or RE8, I think Stygian nails the brief. It's not perfect, and it definitely needs optimization, but it's a solid start for a fledgling release. If I'm being honest, Lovecraft scares me about as much as a hangnail. The dude can kick rocks, and the setting is ridiculously oversaturated and gaming. But since I don't have the power to stop developers from using his work, the least I can do is reward the good behaviors within, like employing good stealth design and getting the proper survival fundamentals right. It's impressive what Mysterial Games has put together, being just a month out from its release. Assuming a 2026 launch for 1.0, this could be a very good stopgap as you wait on Resident Evil 9. But in the future, we're gonna need to figure out if anyone else has ever written a horror novel. You've reached the end of the video. Congratulations, your prize is a free subscription to my channel. No, you don't need to thank me. Just hit the like button and tell me your favorite survival horror game in the comments. We're almost all the way through this marathon of reviews, but you can look forward to videos on Squirreled Away and the Abandoned Planet next week, and Locomoto the following week. I've got a Patreon linked in the video description, and you can see Tuesday's video a day early if you donate $1, plus additional perks if you donate more. Special thanks to my indie darlings, Rob Scott, Tyler McBride, Thumpus, Nick Shalark, Tony Domenico, and Game Trekker. That's all for now. Until next time, you'll find me in another castle.